everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I wanted to talk about one of the most interesting Pokemon TCG formats in recent history. Interesting doesn't mean best. Best is, of course, subjective, but things that make formats fun are lots of different decks you can play of different, styles, stuff that can be more aggressive, more defensive, and fun to play against as well. This is the Silver Tempest format, but it's also like the Sword and Shield block format. There's a block format called the Sword and Shield series, but theoretically it's the same thing. However, a lot of these tournaments that were played in the Sword and Shield block series were played before the later sets of the format came out. These were played in like the middle of the era, so it's just like part of the Sword and Shield format. But Silver Tempest was the last Sword and Shield set outside of the Stellar Crown. I want to take a quick look, or not Stellar Crown, had Crown Zenith, around Crown set. And Crown Zenith didn't have too many impactful cards. Just want to point out a few. There is Kyogre. Let's put in Gym Power Excalibur. Did not matter in this format though. Really at all, I don't think. And then there were certainly some reprints which were like playable, but nothing insane. We have Zamazenta. We have Radiant Eternus. Radiant Eternus isn't particularly good, but is like moderately mentionable. We do have Bidoof. Bidoof, I guess, is meaningful, but it's just a previous evolution. And then we had the somewhat strange tool card, Skyseal Stone. This card allowed you to one-shot a Mew VMAX for free for 4 prizes, theoretically, which is like insane. That was something that would happen, and it was meaningful, but this card was not format defining, but definitely the most important card from Stellar Crown, or sorry, not Stellar Crown, I keep saying Stellar Crown, from Crown Zenith. And so, it's a card that is something kind of worth considering, but not that important. Looking at the metagame, and keep in mind, this is the last set of the Sword and Shield era, and so this was the last set before rotation. And with this rotation, or before this, like before rotation happened with Silver Tempest, we had cards from Sword and Shield base set through Silver Tempest or Crown Zenith, and so that would be the entire Sword and Shield block. And Crown Zenith does not have a separate thing here. Limitless recently started, which is the database I'm using, or Play Limitless recently added the first mini set, but most of the mini sets don't have special formats. Anyways, the metagame looks like this, and I will be talking about these decks in order from least to most crazy, I guess is how I'll describe it. Like, these decks are absolutely nuts. It's really interesting to look back on. Some of these decks were very unfun to play against and with. They weren't like that unfun to play with, but they were pretty crazy to play against and a little unfun, very, game dominating and destroying. They would just absolutely obliterate you. But look at the game, and some of these decks aren't in the game now. A lot of them are. The only deck here in the top 10, well, no, Eternus isn't in the game, but Eternus is definitely like not one of the decks that I feel like defines this era. It is one of the VMAX decks, but the main one is Mew Genesect, Mew VMAX. There were kind of 2 variations, but here it looks like they are not separated. There is they go by different names, and the names are all terrible because the names can refer to either deck, but there's the one with Meloetta and the one without Meloetta. So we'll be taking a look at the one with Meloetta, but they have similar ideas. You have Lugia Archeops. Lugia Archeops is a deck in Standard right now that is played and is not a bad deck. It is a solid deck. It is not like the best deck, but it is a top 10 deck, certainly, and one that is very, very solid and good. And, it can do some cool things in Standard. However, here it does a lot more. Then we have Lost Zone. Lost Zone, again, is a deck in Standard. It's not played that much. It is an okay deck, but it's just not played that much. I don't exactly know why, to be honest. I know there are some reasons, but such as Kyurem, and people just, I don't know, it's fallen off some, but it's not a bad deck in Standard, and I imagine most of you are somewhat familiar with it. However, it does a lot more here. I will not talk too much about the different attackers. There are a lot of different attackers, though, as we look down the list. You have Giratina VSTAR. You have Hisuian Gudra VSTAR. You have this Rayquaza, which is Rayquaza Amazing Rare. And there might be some other builds. You can play Radiant Charizard or Radiant Greninja as your Radiant of choice. You really do want to be playing Radiant Greninja if you're not playing Radiant Charizard. And those are kind of 2 different decks. I don't believe they're separated here. I don't exactly remember how decks are defined, though. They have changed over time. And then we have the Regis deck. The Regis, again, they're a deck now. They're completely different now than they were then. And then you have Arceus. Arceus VSTAR, if we combine decks, it hops up to the third most played deck. Arceus VSTAR is a versatile card and deck. And again, it's a deck now, it's not that played. Now, if we look at the metagame now, you see Lugia VSTAR chilling near the top 5. You see, what were the other decks? You obviously don't see Mew VMAX. Reggie's, I don't know where Reggie's are. Maybe they are here and I passed them. But they're certainly not like a top deck. And then you also have Lost Zone chilling down here, though it's not like a bad deck. You see it a few different Lost Zone decks here. It's a very playable deck, but just not like a super great deck. Then you have, what were the decks? I've forgotten them. You have, oh, Arceus. Yeah, that's the last deck. And Arceus is, if we combine decks, it shows up. Does it show up? Yeah, it's not that played, right? The Stellar Crown metagame is, it's not that new, but it's like still somewhat new. So that's partially why we might see like less Arceus. I feel like we'll see more Arceus as the format goes on. They're not like that much. I don't expect it to be a top 10 deck or anything like that. But those decks are still there, but they are very different and are much more powerful, or were much more powerful in the past than they are now. Let's start with the Regis deck. Regis, if you are not familiar with, there are 6 of them, and they each are of different types, and that is meaningful here. But you have a Regigigas. Regigigas has its ability Ancient Wisdom. Once during your turn, if you have all the Regis in play, you need the other 5 in play, and then you need Regigigas in play, of course, to actually use it. Then you can accelerate 3 energies from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. It does not technically need to be one of the Regis, but this fills up your entire bench, so it does. In Standard, it doesn't need to be. The Regis are very weird in Standard and pretty bad, but here you're just attacking with the Regis. And you have this attack Gigaton Break for 5 colorless, which does 150, which is really bad, but it does 300 to a VMAX. And then we also see the card Choice Belt here, increasing the damage you do to Pokemon V by 30. In the current metagame, Pokemon V are certainly played. Vs include basic Pokemon Vs as well as V Stars and V Maxes and V Unions as well, I suppose. But and you probably wouldn't do so well against Mewtwo V Union. But anyways, you can do extra damage to those. But in the current metagame, there are Vs and there are EXs as well, and there are some single prizers. But in terms of multi-prizers, there are Vs and EXs, and there's like a pretty big split between them. They're both played. So if you're just targeting one of them, you're missing out. But in this metagame, the Regis are really the only, well, no, they're not the only single prize deck. Lost Zone's also a single prize deck, and there's Zoroark, and then I guess Control is like kind of single prize. But mostly the decks are V-Stars and V-Maxes, so you can go ahead, equip Choice Belt, and be doing extra damage like all the time, 30 extra damage. And the VMAXs specifically have 330 HP, so I guess Eternus VMAX would have more. They always still deal with that, but that's not a super meta relevant deck. To the big one is Mew VMAX. And then of course the V-Star decks, this is not your attacker against the V-Stars, but against Mew VMAX you can do Gigaton Break and then Choice Belt. Then you have Regieleki. There are 2 different Regielekis, or there were. In Standard there's only 1, but this one can do 120 for lightning colors. And this other one has a snipe attack, which is usable, but more so like techy. And then you have Regidraco, which has a draw ability, a mediocre draw ability. Regirocket's 140 in his fighting type. Registeel is whatever. Regice is definitely kind of interesting here because it allows you to do 100, and then if the defending Pokemon is a Pokemon V, it can't attack next turn. If you look at a deck like a Mew VMAX, that's pretty weak because they have free retreat. But if you, and I guess Lugia Gaps can retreat, it's not super strong, but is useful against something like, say, Arceus Duraludon, which we'll take a look at. Arceus VSTAR had a lot of different partners, though. You have Duraludon, Flying Pikachu, which are both VMAXs. You have this Arceus deck, which can be paired with all sorts of stuff. Lugia VSTAR. I feel like Guillotina's got to be here, but I might have missed it. And Tapu Koko VMAX, Regidraco, V-Star, Inteleon. Wait, what is this? Which Inteleon is that? Oh, no, that's the single prize Inteleon. Never mind. So you have that, just like an Arceus. I don't really know exactly what all these different decks are. And we'll take a look at an Arceus Duraludon deck, which also plays Arceus with Flying Pikachu VMAX. Oh, there's Giratina down here somewhere. But you can, do annoying stuff to them, stop them from attacking if they don't retreat, which they can retreat sometimes, but not always, so it does have some value here. However, you're accelerating 3 energies, which is enough to pay all the attacks, except for Regigigas, but it does not need to be basic energies, and we see no basic energies in this deck here. We see 4 copies of Aurora Energy, which is, in my opinion, the defining card of this format. Aurora Energy is more or less the same as Rainbow Energy or Prism Energy. It's a little different than Prism Energy, but it's close enough. And then Legacy Energy or Luminous Energy in Standard, except there's a big difference between Legacy and Luminous Energy because both the Regis and Lugia are in Standard and they don't have this type of energy. Luminous Energy only provides every type of energy, but only if it's the only special energy attached. And as you saw, the attacks, they are 2 energy of a type. So you need multiple luminous energies in that case, and you can't do that. That just won't work. Then Legacy Energy is better than Aurora Energy. It's directly better, essentially. However, there is the obvious downside that it's an ace spec, so you can only play one of it. So it's not necessarily doing what you want it to do here either. But Aurora Energy, you just need to discard a card from your hand, provides every type of energy, and you want the energy in the discard anyway with Regigigas, and then you just accelerate it. So you're not just even paying the discard cost, which is sometimes good, which is actually, it can be an issue not to pay it, but generally once they're in the discard, you just accelerate them and keep accelerating them. Your Pokemon gets knocked out, you play a new one and accelerate it again, and you have switching. Scuba Net is a card that I'm not going to talk about just yet. We will get to that. That is also a meaningful and very impactful card in this format, but Aurora Energy was the heart of this deck. One Energy is like double Turbo Energy, except it doesn't have a downside. It only works on non-Vs or GXs. It would actually work on EXs, and if you're playing Expand, you can do that, but in Standard, it's not going to be working on stuff like Mew VMAX, which we'll talk about. Instead, we'll have to use double Turbo Energy, but regardless, you can use this to power up a Regigigas because it's 5 energies and you only accelerate 3 cards, but you could do energies which are worth 2. There's some other cool energies here, and you get value, but the big thing is Aurora Energy allowing you to just do absolutely insane things. And then we have the stadium, one of the 4s in this list, which is Path to the Peak. This is one of the best stadiums of all time. I'm not as familiar with older stadiums, but this stadium is really good. It is definitely the best stadium that we've seen in quite a while. The best stadium now is, and that we've seen since Path to the Peak, would be the one from Stellar Crown, which is Area Zero Underdepths, which is solid. Pokestop's also good. I think Area Zero Underdepths is more defining than Pokestop, although I've never been a massive fan of it, but it would be those two. But Path to the Peak is definitely better than those because this is Pokemon play with a rule box, including ones that when they hit the board have unplay abilities, have no abilities. This is insane. We'll take a look at the other decks. I mean, I'll just talk about them now real quick. Mew VMAX is so weird, but it does heavily rely on its abilities. Lugia VSTAR relies on its ability once during the course of the game. You need to use its ability as quickly as possible. You need to use the ability, and if you can't, then you essentially just lose. Arceus VSTAR really likes its ability. Duraludon VMAX likes its ability. You have Pokemon like Crobat V, which wants its ability, or Lumineon V, which wants its ability. We see Palkia VSTAR, which wants its ability. And this is really strong. Radiant Greninja, this also shuts down Radiant Greninja. It's just super strong and allows this deck that isn't necessarily quite as strong as the other decks, although it can really one-shot everything for single prizes, but just has consistency issues is really the reason why it's not as strong. You can use Path to Peak to slow your opponent down and catch up to them. Although you are a single prize deck that can really one-shot anything, you have Pokemon like Arceus VSTAR you can one-shot with Regirock. You have Palkia VSTAR or Lugia VSTAR you can one-shot with Regieleki with a Choice Belt because they have 280 HP. You need to do a little bit more before, and this is before weakness as well. And Mew VMAX you one-shot with Regigigas and Lost Zone. I honestly don't remember how that matchup works. Regis are definitely I think the least remembered deck of this era. They are a fun deck, but kind of a weird deck. Then we have Arceus VSTAR, and these decks are only 3 rows, a lot of them, which is really interesting. We have a lot of 4 rows, but Arceus VSTAR, they still had depth, though. Arceus VSTAR, I imagine most of you know what it does, but its ability, which is a once per game VSTAR power, it lets you search for any 2 cards. It's really strong. Force Seal Stone is a really highly played card now. Arceus VSTAR's VSTAR power is just objectively better. It's about twice as good, a little less than twice as good, but it lets you, because of diminishing value on searching extra cards. There's some stuff to go with it, but it's still very good. It's almost twice as good as Force Seal Stone, which is already very good. And so this will set you up and is really the only way to search special energies and stadiums at this time. Of course, now we have Colossus Tenacity to do that, but that's not a super powerful card right now. But regardless, you have a strong V-Star power. Then you have your attack, Trinity Nova. which for 3 colorless, which would be a double turbo plus regular energy, would be hitting 200 or 180 with a double turbo. And then you search your deck for 3 basic energies and attach them to your Pokemon V in any way you like. I said it would be a double turbo, but your next Arceus VSTAR you can power up, and then you won't have a double turbo on that. It can be hitting 200. And you could also put Choice Belt on. That's not played here, but you could do that to allow you to one-shot basic Pokemon Vs. We also see Duraludon VMAX. It has an attack, which is a solid attack, but the thing you're looking at here is going to be the ability to Sky Scraper, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that have special energy attached. We talked about the Regi's deck, and the Regi's deck exclusively attacks with special energy. The Lugia VSTAR deck exclusively attacks with special energy. The Mew VMAX deck also exclusively attacks with special energy. Now, there are some really interesting interactions. Lugia VSTAR can knock you out with an effective attack, and then the other decks also have Path to the Peak. That is the win condition against the Duraludon VMAX card. And there's also Flying Pikachu VMAX. This deck will absolutely cook Regis, most likely, because this will wall basic Pokemon. You can actually, this can be stopped, like interrupted by the Regice, but there's a lot of weird stuff here. There's Fear Tree, there's the big Parasol card which stops effects of attacks, which is meaningful here. But long story short, you have Flying Pikachu VMAX. That's going to be walling off basic Pokemon, also hitting Lightning Weakness. Lightning Weakness was one of the best weaknesses to hit. There are 3 weaknesses. Looking at the top decks, you have Lightning Weakness for Lugia as well as Palkia. You have Fighting Weakness for Arceus, and then you have a Darkness Weakness for Mew. And so you just want to be hitting those weaknesses. We don't see Darkness Weakness here, but you could certainly see Darkness Pokemon within Arceus VSTAR or various decks. I guess you'd be looking at Drapion V, which is a really insane counter to Mew VMAX, though would not necessarily always win you the game. But it was very good. We also see some various stadiums in different things here, but nothing too crazy. We see Colossus Experiment as just a draw supporter, which is pretty interesting as it's a draw 3, except you look at the top 5, and so it's essentially draw 5. Losing 2 cards isn't that big of a deal, especially when you have a lot of forbs that have a solid value, but losing 1 for the game isn't, if you lose an Arceus V, whatever. You're not playing 4 Arceus Vs in the game. So Colossus Experiment has a really solid value and is almost a draw 5 supporter. And we see energies to pay your attacks, and you do them in deck. There's stuff to say about Arceus VSTAR, but this isn't focused on that. Then we have what I consider the third deck. It's not necessarily the third best deck, but it's a deck that I think is less associated with this specific era, but it is Mew VMAX, and a Genesect V. These are the 2 cards which make the deck so strong. Genesect V is absolutely insane. Its ability, Fusion Strike system, once during your turn. And by the way, this is where the decks start to get really, really. They're doing so much, right? You see this ability, Fusion Strike system. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have as many cards in hand as you have Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. I recently talked about this card, ranking Pokemon Vs, and I'm pretty sure this is the best one. It's probably the best Pokemon of the Sword and Shield era, in my opinion, but that's certainly up for debate. But if you have 6 Fusion Strike Pokemon in play, 4 of which are Genesect Vs, which is possible, you can draw till you have 6 cards in hand because you have 6 Fusion Pokemon in play, up to 4 times for each Genesect V. That could draw you 24 cards, and this deck has a lot of items. And then it has lots of cards, lots of the items discard other cards from your hand. Ultra Ball does. It's not like absurd amounts of discard, but there's a decent chunk. And so you can draw, that's half your deck. And then you're also searching, and you have other cards. So you don't want to draw 24 cards in your one turn. That's actually, if you do that twice, you will lose the game, because that's 48 cards. You will lose the game unless you get Marnie or something. Marnie is a supporter. I guess I should have talked about it before. It's kind of like Iono. It's kind of like Judge. It's kind of in between. It's a little bit stronger than Judge, essentially, because you draw 1 more card. And Genesect here will be drawing so many cards, though. You don't want to go too hard. You sometimes see people, new people with Mew VMAX, just accidentally deck themselves out because it's that explosive draw. It's so insane. There's a card, Shaman EX, which is super good. Genesect V is essentially it's almost directly better than Shaman EX within this specific deck. Then it does have an attack that does 210. It can't attack next turn. The attack cost doesn't matter because you can copy it with Mew VMAX to using Cross Fusion Strike for 2 colorless, which is just 1 double turbo energy. Choose one of your bench Fusion Strike Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. that would be the main attack you're copying, especially in the decks that don't play Meloetta. Meloetta does 70 for each Fusion Strike energy attached to all your Pokemon. You can get them all into play by turn 2 using the supporter Elisa's Sparkle, which accelerates 2 into play, and then you can also attach one. So you can actually attack turn 1 going second with Meloetta for 210 damage, which is a lot, but the Meloetta will get knocked out, and you won't be able to hit as much damage. You do also have Power Tablet, which you play and just do 30 more damage this turn, and it does stack. So theoretically, turn 1 you could one-shot anything, and that's not necessarily what you're looking to do, though. But you have Mew VMAX as this essentially 1 energy attacker, which is able to hit really solid damage output. It has free retreat, and it does have other attacking options as well. You can copy a bench Mew VMAX, or actually have 2 Fusion Strike energy provide every type. So you could do 2 Fusion Strike energies on the Mew VMAX and be hitting 130 or more if you have Power Tablet. We just do Choice Build as well, so you can hit solid damage with that. Also, sorry if there's background noise. I don't know if there is, or if you can hear it. But anyways, Mew VMAX is going to be able to hit. It's a wall-breaking attack here with Max Miracle. It just hits through effects, which is useful. Again, say those decks that are stopping special energy, you can just use Max Miracle. Or you can play Path to the Peak. Some lists play a lot of Path to the Peak and then Lost Vacuum. This list doesn't play any Lost Vacuum, but Lost Vacuum will bump the stadium. Path to the Peak is really brutal for a lot of decks, but if you're able to control the when Path to Peak is in play, you could bump it on your turn and then use your abilities, and then play it after you've used your abilities to essentially have the stadium be one-sided and not really be punished by the stadium. Then you have Mew V's attack. There are 2 here, but the one you're looking at here is going to be Psychic Leap, which says you can shelf this Pokemon, all cards attached to it into your deck. You also do some damage. It's a healing attack, which is really solid. It's a healing and damaging attack. Generally, attacks that just heal aren't really what you're looking to do. It does remove Mew VMAX from play. The big downside of it, its only weakness really is the fact, well, its weakness is a weakness, but the big weakness is going to be the fact, oh, and by the way, its weakness was like there are a lot of cards that were direct counters to this card. There's Drapion V. That's not in this deck. Is in this deck? No, it's not in this deck either. But you could play it, and it was a hard counter to it because of weakness and a few other things. But you have the weakness of giving up 3 prizes as a Pokemon VMAX. Same thing with some of the VMAXs paired with Arceus VSTAR, but when your main attacker is a VMAX, if you get knocked out twice, you will lose because that's 6 prizes. So that's the really only weakness of this deck here. Then we move to Lost Zone. And I don't want to undervalue Mew VMAX. It is one of the best decks in modern history. It's probably the best deck in modern history, one of the best decks ever. Like when it came out in Fusion Strike, it was a top deck until it rotated, which would be with Tempo Forces, I believe it. Yeah, it wasn't in format. It was in format. Paradox Rift here. We can see Mew VMAX wasn't like no, it's just pretty solid. It's a top 10 deck here, and like before that, it certainly wasn't. It's not great against Charizard EX, but it's still a very good deck for quite a long time. Regardless, it was a good deck, but was behind these top 2 decks in terms of the absolutely insane plays it can make. We have Lost Zone. Lost Zone is a deck that is played now, and if you don't know, it's based around, of course, well, it's obviously based around the Lost Zone, and we have Comfy. Comfy says if it's in the active, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 into the Lost Zone, and put the other into your hand. It's a draw engine. It's not an absolutely insane draw engine, but it does fuel the Lost Zone. And there are 3 targets you're looking at for Lost Zone. There is actually Giratina V-Star as well, which is an attacker but can get value from cards in the Lost Zone. There's also the supporter Fantina. There are a few things, but the main ones are the big 3 here. You have Cramorant, which can do 110, but it attacks for free if you have no cards in the Lost Zone. So, or no, if you have 4 cards in the Lost Zone, it attacks for free. There we go. And you could very easily do this turn 1 going second almost every time. In standard format, you can sometimes do it, but you really need to hit Colus's Experiment. Colus's Experiment is kind of like Comfy. It's a supporter. I mentioned it earlier, but you look at the top 5, put 3 into your hand, and put 2 into the Lost Zone. This is a very powerful way to put cards in the Lost Zone. You do have Lost Vacuum, but there's only 1 copy of that. It's not like you're trying to Lost Vacuum all your own cards and do that. That's not really something you're looking to do. It's just a counter card here that has synergy with the Lost Zone. But Colus's Experiment is going to be putting 2 in, which is nice, but you could just use Comfy 4 times, and you don't need to play 4 Comfies to do that. We'll get to that, because you can only use this ability once per turn. Switching to the bench is not going to remove it. It's not an effect on attack. It's like an ability. There are weird things about effects of attacks, but anyways, Comfy is nice. You can use its ability 4 times, and then you can attack with Kermit for 110, which is solid, not absolutely insane, but 110 for free is quite good. Then we have Sableye here. No, 110 for free is absolutely insane, but it's not something that can be like in the later mid to late game 110. You're looking for more than that, and you can actually get energies in play. Sableye is a mid to late game attacker. I think you can use it turn one. Yeah, it looks like you can. It's like you're not going to use it turn one, but it is theoretically possible. But Sableye says if you have 10 or more cards in the lost zone, put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. That's a lot of damage counters. We see Dusknoir as a really impactful card. Comparing these two cards is a little weird, but Sableye is able to place damage counters exactly where you want it to finish off targets or to take multiple prizes on single prize Pokemon, knock out 260 HP basics, something like that. Really, really difficult to deal with for single prize decks. It's kind of like Dragapult VMAX. It's different. It's doing less damage by a lot. It's doing less than half the amount of damage if you count damage counters as damage. If you don't count damage counters as damage, then it doesn't do any damage. But you're doing a solid chunk of damage. But neither of these are absolutely insane damage output attackers against Mew VMAX. This ain't doing too much. Yes, you can go knock out 3 Genesect Vs with Sableye over the course of a few turns, but that's not really what you're looking to do. What you are looking to do here, though, is with the big attacks, is Mirage Gate. Mirage Gate says if you have 7 or more cards in the Lost Zone, search your deck for up to 2 basic energies of different types and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. This allows you to power up every Pokemon in the entire game, essentially, and so you do that. We have lots of really crazy attackers. One is Rayquaza, which can one-shot everything on a single prize, but you do need to use probably multiple Mirage Gates to do so. You have Lugia VSTAR, which has its attack that reduces damage done to it, and it was a very good defensive Pokemon. You had Giratina VSTAR, which was a very powerful offensive Pokemon. Gudra and Giratina are 2 Pokemon that are kind of viewed pretty similarly, played in similar roles. You could also pair them both with Arceus, and Giratina is super strong in its damage output, not necessarily one-shotting everything, though it does have a V-Star power that will just one-shot everything, but it's doing really solid damage. Assuming Gudra V-Star is doing less damage, but it is taking less damage and surviving hits. So kind of 2 sides to the same coin is how I describe these 2 cards. But you didn't have to play those. You could just play all basics as well. And this deck has a bunch of different basics. You got Radiant Greninja, which does 90 to 2, which is solid. Radiant Greninja plus Sableye really applied a lot of pressure to decks doing very solid amounts of damage. You also have Galarian Zigzagoon on play. You place a damage count on one of your opponent's Pokemon, which is nice. We'll get to why that is even more powerful. It's like Hawlucha, though, and provides similar value, but I don't know if it's better or worse. It really depends. Galarian Zigzagoon can ping the active. Hawlucha pings 2 bench Pokemon. So some slightly different cards here. We see Raikou V for one-shotting those Lightning Weak Pokemon. We have Kyogre. This can do big snipe damage here. It's a late game combo card, but it's not super crazy and pretty strong. And Echoing Horn also puts a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard into play. I believe we saw this in the Mew VMAX deck. It allows you to bring a Pokemon that you're able to knock out easily into play that's hopefully worth multiple prizes, and then you can go ahead and knock it out. It can be used in control. That's, I think, what it's more known for, but it is good in just really any deck in the game. Try and take knockouts on easy targets. You can knock out an easy target, bring it back, knock it out again, instead of having to go through some Pokemon with absurd amount of HP. Imagine standard, would you rather knock out a Bloodwing or Saluna EX with 260 HP or a Squawkabilly EX with 160 HP? It's obviously Squawkabilly EX. It's way easier. So if you're able to bring that back, you can just knock that out twice. Then we have Snorlax, which is just the definition of a solid attacker. I think it's one of the most underrated cards of the Sword and Shield era. I'm not sure if that's actually true. I feel like people don't really think it's that good. And it is somewhat generic and outclassed by other cards, but it is nice. And Oranguru has some cool synergy as well with some things. We got Birdkeeper, which is a switch card. We have a few switch cards. We have Escape Rope and Switch Card, which are both just switch cards. Then we have Birdkeeper, which is a supporter switch card. But then we have Scoop of Net. Scoop of Net is banned. Yeah, it's banned and expanded because it's insane. And it says put one of your Pokemon that isn't a V or GX into your hand. This could be an EX. That's ultimately why it was banned, but it was absolutely insanely powerful without that, because this allows you to scoop up your Comfy. Once it's out of play, and then you put it back into play, it's considered a different Pokemon, so you could flower selecting again. So you could just play two Comfies and then two Scoop Up Nets, and then all of a sudden you need some switch in there as well, but you've flower selected 4 times, and now you can just cram it. Scoop Up Net enabled so many combos, and they weren't like absolutely super complicated combos, but they were very, very powerful, like simple combos. You got Inteleon, you can scoop it up to play it back down. You have it was played in the Regi's deck as a switching card that has like healing elements as well. It's just a really, really powerful and versatile card. Then we have Galarian Zigzagoon, which I mentioned, and you could scoop this Pokemon up to then play it back down to just do more damage. And that was ultimately, I feel like it had some reasoning to why this card was banned and expanded. There's a deck called, or it's more so an archetype called Donk. So there's 3 win conditions in Pokemon TCG. There's the normal one, which is taking 6 prizes. There is running on a Pokemon on your opponent like it doesn't have any Pokemon in play, which would be essentially Donk. And then there is running your opponent out of cards, which is mill. Control decks often go after that win condition as well. But Donk is not really a deck in standard, though you could kind of play it, but in expanded it was a deck, and this was part of why ultimately, though, with Iron Valiant EX that was twice as good as Galarian Zigzagoon, and it allowed you to do these really, really powerful combos. We could just knock out all your points Pokemon for relatively low value. Then we got Dusknoir, or no, we got Duskull and Dusclops, which then also let you do them. Things just escalated, and bans happened. But anyways, this card, it was a very, very strong for Lost Zone. It enabled you to theoretically Mirage Gate turn 1. You play 4 Scoop of Nets and 3 Comfies, and that's a turn 1 Mirage Gate. Or probably the other way around, 3 Scoop of Nets. Well, actually, no, you just do maybe 2 Scoop of Nets, 3 Comfies, and a Closest Experiment. That's not that hard to do. Comfies are searchable. You got, Battle VIP Pass. I have not talked about this card yet, have I? This is like Buddy Buddy Poppin', but for any Pokemon, except you only play it turn 1, going first or second, but only on the first turn of the game. But it's like Buddy Buddy Poffin for any Pokemon. So you can go play a bunch, every deck played, or I don't know if every deck played, but most decks played lots of this. Mew VMAX played lots of this, and it was a very, it was generally unlike card. Buddy Buddy Poffin is kind of viewed as like the fixed version of this card, but it is a very strong card. And lastly, we have the deck, the insanely powerful Lugia VSTAR. Lugia VSTAR puts, its ability essentially reads, put 2 Archeops into play. You can put other Pokemon, but I've never seen it happen. I don't think, have I ever seen someone put another Pokemon into play with Lugia? I'm not sure. But generally, you want to put 2 Archeops into play, and then you have this ability Primal Turbo, which says you can accelerate 2 special energy from your deck to one of your Pokemon. You have 2 Archeops, so that's 4 special energy. And now we look at the really, really powerful attackers. We got Raikou Amazing Rare for Grass Lightning Metal, which these are kind of like the stellar Pokemon, except they're more payable, as we'll see. You do 120 to your opponent's active and to one of their bench. Then we have a Veltal Amazing Rare, which says your opponent's active is instantly knocked out for Fire, Psychic, Darkness, Colorless, Colorless. That is kind of expensive. Luckily, you can pay it for only 4 energies. You got Aurora Energy, which we mentioned earlier. We also see Heat, Fire Energy. There was a special energy of each type, each of the main 9 types. There's no special Dragon Energy, but there's a Colorless one, Powerful Colorless, which is you do 20 more damage with Colorless Pokemon, but it can be attached anywhere and just provide a Colorless. And same thing with Heat, Fire, that can be attached to your Yveltal. It gives you 20 more HP on your Radiant Charizard, but whatever. Radiant Charizard, we probably all know that, or mostly know that Pokemon. It's just a solid attacker. You can actually attack with it turn 2, but you don't really want to be doing that for 5 energy. But 5 energy to instantly knock out your opponent's active on a single prizer, yeah, that feels pretty good. And so you can just power this up and just start obliterating stuff. Then we also have Lugia VSTAR. Normally this hits 220, but with powerful Colorless, you can stick 4 of those on a hit 300. Then you can attach choice, but you can do 330 with your Lugia VSTAR, and you don't even need to play any energies from hand. We also see Stoutland V. Stoutland V is the most underwhelming card in this deck, especially compared to now, because Double Dip Fangs are 4. It does 40 for 3 colorless, but if you knocked out a basic Pokemon with damage from this attack, you take 1 more prize. It's like Iron Hands EX, but it is cheaper to pay, but it's way weaker, so you need to do a bunch of powerful colorless energy generally, or at least a few, and it's kind of underwhelming, but still strong and annoying for single prize decks. Overall, Lugia VSTAR is absolutely broken when it's set up. It didn't always set up, but it often did, and then all of a sudden you can go ahead and start just one-shotting everything for a single prize Pokemon, or maybe two prizes, but it was really, really strong. Anyways, tell me what you think about these decks if you've never played with them especially. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all the good stuff, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.